A race to find and rescue more than 1,000 people missing a day after catastrophic floods along the Nepal-Tibet border. As the risk of another devastating deluge grows, officials say at least 350 people have been killed. Entire villages swept away in Nepal after a tsunami-like rumble of water and mud surged through valleys and towns on Wednesday morning. Roads and bridges destroyed, cutting off communities and complicating rescue operations. Across the border in Tibet, roads leading to the Gyirong crossing have been damaged. Mud in some areas was more than 1.5 meters deep. At least 125 people have been rescued so far, amongst them 27 tourists from South Korea, Italy, the United States and India. But travelers from more than 24 countries are still not accounted for. They include people from India, Australia, Britain and Malaysia. 9 Singaporeans are amongst those who are missing. Thousands of personnel have been deployed, along with sniffer dogs used to comb through thick layers of mud and debris. Efforts complicated by rising waters in a new lake formed where the flood occurred yesterday. Authorities are warning it could burst its banks, and that could unleash more waters onto already severely affected areas. I'm joined by Rebecca Bundhun. She's tracking developments for CNA on the ground in Kathmandu, and CNA senior correspondent Guan standing by in Shanghai with more on the Chinese response. Rebecca, we start with you. Tell us how Nepal's relief and rescue efforts are shaping up, and how are they planning to reach communities which we can see very clearly in footage are now cut off?
We're approaching sunset here in Nepal, and that's only going to make those efforts even more difficult. It's been an incredibly difficult day for rescue teams, the army, to try to reach people, to reach certain areas. It's incredibly difficult terrain, very narrow roads. Much of the infrastructure has been destroyed in certain areas. So just those very difficult circumstances. They've been using helicopters, even zip lines to try to reach people and get supplies to people, but it has been very difficult. And now with those warnings of a possible second flood, obviously that would just make things all the more challenging. And it is already this race against time with hundreds of people still missing. And this is a huge challenge for the government. Under a relatively new Prime Minister and new government, under Balendra Shah, he's been visiting areas that have been affected, holding meetings. Just really the response has just been all hands on deck to try to get to people. But that race against time, as hundreds of people are still missing and dealing with just extremely difficult circumstances.
Guan, the Chinese border with Tibet, Nepal, affected as well. How are Chinese authorities reacting?
Well, what we are seeing here is Beijing leaning really heavily on the machinery of the state and the military to drive this rescue effort. And perhaps the clearest sign of that is Premier Li Qiang himself is now on the ground in Gyirong after being sent there by President Xi Jinping. In China's system, the premier is the country's #2 official, and he also heads the State Council. So Li's presence there, while the rescue is still unfolding, signals that Beijing sees this as a major national emergency requiring direct central government oversight. And then there's another layer to this. Tibet is not just remote, it is also a politically sensitive border region, so sensitive that foreigners, including journalists, need a special permit to enter. And we have seen globally in regions like these, disaster response can become a test of whether the central government is seen to be present and capable of protecting people. And we are seeing Beijing mobilizing its state machinery at scale. More than 1,200 emergency rescue fire rescue personnel have been deployed. Over 220 vehicles have been deployed as well. Hundreds more road clearance engineering personnel are working with excavators, loaders, drones, live detectors, and 3D scanners. So, military helicopters are also flying over the disaster zone, searching, assessing the damage, and helping map rescue and evacuation evacuation routes. And relief is now arriving as well. We have seen state media reports saying that the first central government shipment to Gyirong, carrying around 30,000 sets of supplies, including tents, warm clothing, and heating stove, has arrived. But of course, this is not just a domestic rescue operation. There's also foreigners who are caught up because there were pilgrims to Mount Kailash.
All right, Rebecca, hearing you on that, this is far from a domestic situation for China. Neither is that for Nepal or come to that Tibet. This is something that benefits all parties to work together. How have you seen Nepal coordinating with other parties, not just with China?
Yes, absolutely. There has been that coordination with cash assistance, supplies coming in from China, of course, Chinese nationals being affected on this side of the border too, being stranded, and many nationalities just missing, dozens of Brits, Americans, and the biggest impacted has actually been Indians. That has the largest number of missing people in this disaster, and India has been sending in disaster response, disaster relief supplies. It's also familiar with these kinds of natural disasters or disasters, and the US has also sent in $500,000 worth in funds. The EU also helping out. So a lot of different countries have seen their nationals affected, and still many people are missing, and they have been stepping in to help. Obviously, given the magnitude of this situation, those supplies have been much welcomed by the government here as they continue with these efforts, which are very, very much ongoing, to try to rescue people. And we still really don't know the full extent of this disaster, how many people have been affected, how many lives have been lost, and how much infrastructure and the extent of the damage to homes and villages yet.
Guan, rescue, as Rebecca suggests, under these situations, this situation would be difficult in any case, but looking at those pictures and what we heard about glacier collapse triggering instability in the terrain, there is ongoing risk, and we've heard warnings of the kinds of risk we can expect from the Chinese.
Well, the biggest risk now really is that lake that you mentioned, that the barrier lake that is formed upstream of Gyirong port. Now, what does that mean? Very simply, mud, rock and debris have blocked the river, and water is simply building up behind that wall of blockage. And if the natural dam gives way, all that water could surge downstream all at once. That could trigger another powerful flood. And really, that Chinese media says the water level in that barrier has risen compared with last night. So this is a new concern tonight. So this is no longer just a theoretical risk. Teams are now using drones, satellite equipment, 3D scanning technology to work out how stable that blockage is and how much water is building up behind it. We must remember that a similar chain of events may have played a role in the first disaster itself. Satellite analysis suggests that a collapse of ice, rock, and debris upstream may have blocked the river before the initial flood. The exact sequence is now being investigated, but it helps explain why this barrier lake matters so much now. Because every decision in the rescue is not affected by that risk. Can roads be cleared safely? Can heavy machinery move in? And how far do you send rescuers into areas that may be unstable? This is really a race on two fronts to reach those still missing and to make sure that the people trying to save them do not become victims of a second disaster. Wei Su?
Well, thanks to Guan explaining the secondary risks for us in this natural disaster we're seeing affecting Tibet, Nepal, as well as China. Rebecca Bundhun for CNN in Kathmandu, and CNN senior correspondent Guan for us there in Shanghai. Thank you.